Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the APSCC webinar series. I'm Blaine Curcio, Senior Affiliate Consultant at Euroconsult, and today I'm fortunate enough to be interviewing the CEO of Asia Satellite Telecommunications Company Limited, AsiaSat, Mr. Roger Tong, here in Hong Kong. Today is April 4th, 2022, and we are looking forward to diving into a lot of interesting updates on AsiaSat. So, Roger, do you want to give us a couple of updates on what's going on at AsiaSat? What's the latest?
It's been pretty busy. I took over as the CEO of AsiaSat in 2018, April 2018. So this is my fourth year.
Okay.
I finished my fourth year. Since I took over, we have privatized ourselves. Okay, and we have regrouped, changed our organization structure, identified new sales head to be responsible for data versus the media business. Because I believe having one person responsible for both is not the right thing to do. Two businesses, even though they both use satellites, are different enough that we need to think about the long-term strategy for the data business versus the media business. Okay. We've been trying to deal with the 5G issue that rolls out and consumes our C-band. And if you followed our work, we have developed our own 5G filters to be provided to our customers. And we groomed our own satellites to make sure that we have a new satellite, AsiaSat 9, that can provide more spectrum space for our media customers. AsiaSat 5 and AsiaSat 7, lower frequency band are being consumed. We've been looking at extending our sales team outside of Hong Kong. If you follow AsiaSat, we've always only about sales team in Hong Kong. We have no international offices or no sales team resides outside of Hong Kong. But as of today, we have people in Singapore, we have people in Indonesia, India, and Malaysia. So we are spreading our wings to be where our customers are. And then we have we group our headquarters from Wan Chai back into here, so we have a more streamlined process flow. We can respond to customers' need much quicker and understand what type of solutions we can provide to our customers as well. Then we looked into developing new partnerships. We have teleport partnerships in Indonesia, in India, and also in China right now. And then we looked at what type of services we should be rolling out. We rolled out our Sailor service in August of last year. We acquired a live streaming company, OCGL, in about May of last year, to add to our portfolio and to look at what is needed by the industry in the long run. On top of that, we also identified new open slot. We have been developing one. We are drifting AsiaSat 4 to do that now. Okay. And then we are planning for our ultimate new satellite. AsiaSat 10 or AsiaSat 5, whichever way you want to call it. So we've been extremely busy in the last 4 years.
That's a lot going on in the last 4 years, and there's a few points I'd like to dig into a little bit more. And just to get back to one of the previous points, you mentioned relocating the headquarters from Wan Chai to here being, of course, scenic Tai Po with a very nice teleport just outside, and I guess now you have all of your teams united under one roof, pretty much, right? Whereas before you had a lot of corporate in Wan Chai and most of the technical team here, I guess?
Actually, I think in terms of people, I believe we have more people in different locations now than we used to.
Okay.
We used to have a Beijing office, a Tai Po office, and a Wan Chai office.
Okay.
Now we have a Tai Po office, a Beijing office, and then we have office in Indonesia, India, Malaysia, and Singapore. So in terms of reach, we are further out. But in terms of Hong Kong, we have co-located our administrative services, our financial services, our salespeople into one location.
Understood. No, that makes sense. And that's cool to have that kind of that network of offices around the region that are in a lot of the hot spots, a lot of the bigger markets that are up and coming.
It's challenging to move our corporate office from Wan Chai to Hong Kong. My CFO tells me, I never worked outside of Hong Kong Island.
Okay. That's a pretty cushy life to have lived, never working outside of Hong Kong Island. That's okay.
Because I think most people like to stay where other jobs are available.
Yes.
Okay, so they can change jobs easier, they have family commitment, they have schooling for kids. So for them to move from Wan Chai into the Hong Kong Island side to Tai Po is a challenge. For me, it's okay because I have no family in Hong Kong. Right? But for a lot of our corporate staff, our general counsel, our finance officers, sales office team, it's not easy. So our people is actually very committed, and we thank them for tolerating the move. And what we try to do is to give them a better lifestyle here, more space. We arrange for shuttle bus to take them home.
Okay.
And we have early releases so they don't get caught in traffic and so on. So it's a compromise between the employees.
Work-life balance sort of thing, yeah. So getting back to two of the earlier points that you mentioned, so the more regional presence and also the new products that we've been rolling out, notably Salus, right? So I saw, I think it was last month, AsiaSat was present at the Asia Pacific Maritime Expo, the APM over in Singapore.
Yeah.
So do you want to go into a little bit of your presence at that conference and then also, I guess, more generally the Salus product and what you see in terms of the maritime sector?
We started to look at the maritime business in 2018, right after I took over as the CEO. I was talking to my sales team and they said, I said, why can't we do maritime business? They said, no, there's no money to be made. We were looking at the efficient boats at that time.
Okay.
And I refused to accept no money to be made. I said, there's industry that has to be served. So me and my technical team and my finance team, we traveled to different fishery ports in China and also in Indonesia to look at what is out there. And we identified their problem, which is there's no point to give them a communication tool if they have no need to communicate. If there's no other platform that supports them, if there's no logistic improvement, why do they need to talk? Just to communicate with the family or watch a movie? Forget it. And they're out there working, they're working hard. So we look at it and say that it's not sufficient just to provide connectivity. While we need to look at the portfolio of services that can be offered to these underserved people, underserved industry. So in 2018, we don't have that capability yet, so we said we should be looking at providing capacity to these service providers that supports the fishing industry. And at that time, because IFC is rolling out and HTS is rolling out, and we don't have HTS yet, so we said the best way to deploy our IFC capacity is to move them into maritime, where the boats are moving slower. They don't really need a lot of spots. They stay in the spot for a long time. So we entered into the maritime business in roughly end of 2018.
Okay.
And diverged away ourselves from IFC market. And we've been there since, and we've been learning about the industry. What does people want? Talking to the service provider, what type of services does the fisherman really want? Okay. Once we reach the point where we believe we understand it enough, then we say it's time to roll out new service. Okay. So our presence in rolling out the Salus service in the maritime actually started in 2018. It's a long process. I'm a very cautious person. I don't like to talk about things before it's done. That's why you don't see a lot of press releases of us. You don't see us going out there talking to the community. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'd rather do it first and then tell people this.
And I think that kind of gets at what I feel is a kind of oversimplification that we talk about in the industry a lot of this satellite operator and service provider. And when you think about the service provider side in particular, there are so many kind of sub-levels of that you say, oh, I'm a satellite service provider, mobility service provider. It's like, well, I don't think that mobility service providers can provide really, really tailored services to every single mobility subvertical, from private jets to wide-body aircraft to fishing boats to land mobile. And so it sounds like in AsiaSat's case, you really looked at a very specific market and said, we're going to really learn all of the pain points here, and we're going to really bring to market a product that's that's suitable. And so can you tell us a little bit more about the specific product? I guess that you mentioned.
I mean, the way I look at it is, if you can serve the toughest market, then you can serve the higher market. Okay. To serve a cruise ship is a different issue than serving a fishing boat.
I suppose it would.
They don't have money. They can't put 4 or 5 antennas on the boat. They only put 1. Okay. They use very basic services. They use services at night. They don't use it in the daytime. Okay. Compared to a cruise or oil rig and those sort of things, or merchant ships, it's all different. Okay. So we believe that understanding the toughest market first, the toughest user, the biggest challenge, will allow us to upgrade to more luxurious applications easy. So we've been looking at how to provide AIS data to fishing boats, and what type of mobile system, mobility system, telecom do they need? Okay, How do they use their devices? Okay. Can we provide entertainment to these fishermen, underserved customers in the most effective way? That allow them to communicate data and be able to watch TV at the same time, things at the same time. So those are the things that we're looking at. Now, there's a lot of applications out in the market already that people develop from maritime services. So we just buy those packages. But the important thing is to understand how the end customer is going to use those services. And then you can decide how to integrate. So that's what we'll be looking at.
And just one last point on maritime, if I can ask. So you mentioned that when you were first looking at this market, you went to some different ports in mainland China and Indonesia. Up to this point, is it safe to assume that most of your activity in the sector has been more towards the Southeast Asian market in terms of end customers, or are you also trying to address mainland Chinese, let's say, fishing vessels or other?
Now, the largest shipping fleet is in China.
Okay.
And unfortunately,
this is in terms of just national level number of fishing ships in the fleet.
So our focus and the way we look at it is we try to make sense on how to use our capacity to serve a sustainable market. So as we don't have an HTS yet, as our orbital slots are from 100.5 to 122, we can only serve from India all the way to Australia. Okay. That's why we're looking at this regional market first. And sailors, the way we look at it is we will use our own capacity to serve the Asia Pacific market, but we will use other people's capacity if the customer wants to extend outside of Asia.
Makes sense.
Okay. So at present, our focus is regional. But we are partnering with a global network and say if our customers both go outside of Asia, we want to be able to continue to provide service to them. And we don't really care whether it's our service or some other people's service. The important thing is the customer is being served.
Yes, makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So another area that you briefly alluded to earlier and that I'd like to dig into a little bit more is some of the things that AsiaSat's doing around spectrum reallocation and around protecting spectrum for satellite operators. So I guess two sub-points. I understand you're speaking virtually later this month at
Bangkok.
Yes, in Bangkok at the Asia Pacific Spectrum Management Conference, right? So I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about that, but then also a little bit more about, Hong Kong is probably one of the leading markets in the world for reallocating C-band for 5G, and AsiaSat being right in the heart of that. It gives you an interesting perspective, I suppose, on the 5G relocation. And to your point, you've developed filters for terminals, so it'd be interesting to hear a little bit more about that also.
Well, I still believe that the allocation of the extended C-band for 5G is wrong.
Okay.
Being a technical person myself, I look at it and say, why do they want to deploy 5G in a lower frequency? While 5G is supposed to serve high capacity, high speed. And we all know, when you want high speed, you want large bandwidth. You want high frequency, you want high bandwidth.
I'm not a technical person, and I know that as well. Yeah, that's it. Yes.
So why would you focus on C-band with only limited bandwidth? And it's very hard to do frequency reuse. With a lot of interference when your signal bounces around and you travel all around the region, rather than if you're familiar with military, they use 60 gigs. The reason why they use 60 gigs is because they propagate only limited distance and they can fade away. So it's natural to build small cells. Okay, and if you want to have 5G with a real application, you want to use picocells, you use micro cells, nano cells. Okay, that you have a lot of bandwidth in a highly concentrated area, and then we can continue to use them. So using 5G frequency as extended C-band is crap. And the only reason why people are doing that is because the equipment provider can provide cheap equipment at low frequency. High frequencies, chipsets are very expensive, it's very hard to make, so the terminal will be expensive. And it's difficult for mobile operators to buy the spectrum and then buy the equipment and then roll it out when the demand is not there.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Much bigger upfront costs, much less certainty. I
That's
think.
right. So the equipment provider drives the whole strategy on 5G to use lower frequency bands so they can sell equipment.
Making it easier for the telcos to justify buying that equipment.
That's right. The telco can roll out their first layer of network at the C-band and then build the network Ka-band, Ku-band afterwards. Once they did that, what happens to C-band? Are they going to return it to us? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah.
Okay. So it's a really bad approach to try and occupy a frequency band that somebody else is using because they can build cheaper terminals, and then their real objective is a higher frequency band.
That does seem like kind of a roundabout way of getting to where they want to go.
Right.
That's at the expense of an entire industry, as it turns out.
At the expense of the whole world.
Well, that too, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the way I view it. Right. And you have to look at it from a technological perspective, an operator capex perspective, and an equipment sales perspective. Who's actually driving this whole C-band for the industry? Why are they doing it? It doesn't make any sense. It makes sense commercially. It doesn't make sense from the sustainability. So we in Hong Kong are faced with that as well. If you look at Hong Kong, they have a dedicated 3.4 to 3.6 initial 5G rollout, and then they will eventually be looking at Ka-band and Ku-band for large-scale rollout as well. And then C-band will be gone. And they will be auctioned, and the government will collect the revenue again. Who knows?
Yeah, and then they come for KU and KA and
The FCC is already talking to you, 12 days.
strange times in the industry. That's and so then your talk in Bangkok, or your virtual talk in Bangkok later this month, is that in any way related to?
We'll be focusing on the C-band first, because in Asia, because of the ring fade, C-band is extremely important to us.
Yes.
And the question is, how can we have a coexistence between satellite services and mobile services? And that needs to be addressed. Unfortunately, a lot of administrations are still being lobbied by telecom operators. And I do agree that there has to be a way to allow 5G services to roll out. So there will have to be an initial rollout in the lower frequency band. And how they use it afterwards, I don't know. Maybe they will stay that way for some countries, for rural areas, but not for large systems.
And I guess, I mean, there are certainly still a number of countries in the region where there'd be some pretty big players that need C-band and that would be going to the local governments and saying, hey, I suppose a lot of banks in Indonesia, for example, their entire networks are connected by C-band, I presume, in a lot of cases. And so, yeah, to your point, it's...
They're connected by C-band because of the rain.
Yeah.
I mean, monsoon season.
Well, and as the existing infrastructure, it's already there. It's I suppose very hard to go and install new equipment on 20,000 ATMs throughout.
Well, I talked to Gazola before, and I say, for us to try and defend C-band using commercial terms is the wrong way to go. What is 3,000 terminals anyway?
It
can be replaced.
Right.
Okay. The FCC is giving out $100 billion to Intelsat and SES to clear the C-band.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to talk in terms of economics, they can always replace satellite. The issue is not about economics. The issue is about sustainability. When an earthquake comes, when a monsoon comes, when a typhoon comes, how do you provide communication with people?
Yeah, and I think this is probably an area that satellite has not done a good enough job of marketing ourselves, saying that, we're the backbone that you really can't knock us out. I mean, you look at Ukraine over the last couple of weeks. Starlink was shipping a lot of terminals into Ukraine, and I don't know to what extent that was or was not legal under the extent to which they had landing rights or not. But nonetheless, it goes to show you that there's a certain level of resilience that one can achieve when you have a space-based.
Yeah, I mean, the question goes back to what is a human life? How much is it worth? 10 people died during an earthquake, tsunami. How many billions of dollars do you relate that to? And as a government, what is your responsibility? Right? So I think those are more issues that we don't get into. But I do think the C-band deployment is the wrong thing to do. Now they've done it, I don't believe they should continue. Now they have a fundamental layer to serve a broad area. They can test out their services. They should be looking at higher frequency band to have enough spectrum to do what 5G really needs to be done. Okay, now the question is Ka-band or Ku-band, why are they targeting another satellite band? And for what reason? There's no reason aside from it's easier. Okay, then go after the 60 gig military band. How many people in the country actually use the military band anyway? Nobody. Except for it's hard to expensive terminals. 60 gig terminals are very expensive to build. So,
yeah, and we'll see how that goes. But hopefully, Ku and Ka-band remain accessible to the sector. That's
in the 2019, I went to the Azora at that time meeting, and people were talking about protecting Ku.
as though C had already been forgotten, and it was just
And I make a statement and say, if we can't even protect the C-band, which is widely deployed, and not every operator have Ka-band or Ku-band, not every country have Ka-band, how do you think you can protect the Ka-band if you can't even protect the C-band?
That's a fair question.
And you can say that we're thinking about the future, but in fact, we're trying to protect it, trying to build a case that we should be continuously using it, not giving it away. When you're talking about something future, you're going to give up what you have.
It sets an interesting precedent. Yeah, I don't know, but
I mean, sometimes the industry got carried away and we think too far ahead, and we don't strategize ourselves adequately to say, what do we have to do? Why do we have to do it? Are we in the central industry purely for money, or are we in the industry to provide communication to serve the crowd and serve the people?
well, I think we can also, to a certain extent, underestimate the critical nature of our industry. We look at ourselves, we say, "Oh, so much smaller than the big telco operators," but that 1%, 0.5%, whatever of the total bandwidth being sent around the world at any given time, it's a very hard to reach 0.5% or whatever it is. So we can, I think, sometimes underestimate how critical that role is that we play. And to your point, it's probably not the best argument to say, well, we're important because we're a big economically powerful industry, but rather to say we're important because we help keep this whole thing running. And you might not appreciate it every day in every situation, but this industry does a lot. It
does an awful lot. Yeah.
Could you imagine? I mean, not necessarily SATCOM, but could you imagine? If all satellite navigation networks went down for a few days, the Deliveroo situation in Hong Kong would become chaos very quickly. So certainly, we may underestimate ourselves sometimes.
We just have to be more careful. I mean, sometimes we have to make difficult choices. So the choice has to be made. We have to be a lot more careful. When you look at the US, the FCC is not fighting with FAA.
Yeah.
They haven't followed through.
Mm.
Okay. So, unfortunately, for a large country like the US, they still haven't followed through. What makes you think that some of the developing countries in this region have the technical capability or have the staff to think it through? And that's what we need to do, is to step up to it and say, hey, look at all these cases, look at all these scenarios, work with them, and understand that a compromise is made, and make that proper compromise.
In a way, it's like AsiaSat acting as an advocate on behalf of the sector to a certain extent. I mean,
well, I think we are just part of the sector, right? The AsiaSat will not do well if the sector will not do well. Right?
Yeah.
And we need to work together and learn from each other. Okay? Different countries have different needs as well. You look at Thailand, they have a different need from Hong Kong. Hong Kong don't have a lot of satellite need themselves. Indonesia and Thailand still have a lot of DTH using C-band. They have different needs, they have different reasons. And we need to learn from them, work together to make sure that the whole industry is in harmony.
Getting onto a point that you just mentioned about DTH, so and now digging into, I guess, AsiaSat's probably bread and butter historically is the video broadcast market. And I noticed earlier this year, I think it was, you signed a strategic cooperation agreement with Nextstep in Thailand to distribute their Thainess kind of boutique TV channel. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you've been doing in the broadcast sector and where you see that going moving forward, and how you see AsiaSat providing value to its customers in that sector?
I mean, linear TV, the broadcasting that we are involved in, mainly on the C-band, is under a lot of pressure.
Okay.
Some of them are real, some of them are just being overblown. Then what we've been doing is, we look at it, first of all, our C-band is getting smaller and smaller. We lost about 250 megahertz of C-band capacity. So the industry is under stress. Now, the fortunate part is of HTF rolling out some of the C-band data services is now no longer exist. They moved to KU-band and they free up some of the spectrum. So on the overall spectrum inventory side, the region is still okay. Now, we'd also look at it and say there's not enough capacity to deal with HD rollout. Okay? If you look at it, Hong Kong, every family has HD TV. You may not have HD 4K content yet, but they have 4K ready TVs.
Yeah.
So it's going to come. And if that comes, is there sufficient bandwidth to deploy or to broadcast 4K content? The answer is no. Okay. So we've been very busy trying to reposition HSAT 4, now HSAT 9, to serve the broadcast market as well. Follow HSAT, traditionally HSAT 4 is a data-centric location. We are transforming that into a media location as well. So when we have an overfill situation in 5 and 7, we can start to move some of our customers to 9, to niche channels to build it up. So that's one of the things that we're doing on the media side. We also looked at it and say the media is losing some of these key customers to OTT. For example, Disney is moving away from media TV broadcasting to OTT. And the way I try to explain that to my team is like you're walking into a supermarket and now you have empty shelves. The cable head end is now having empty shelves. They used to be filled with their content. Now they have nothing to fill. My supermarket is still there.
Yeah.
You want them on the broadcast.
That's an interesting analogy.
Right?
Yeah.
And they will start watching their TV on streaming, and then you have this big cable head in there, local cable operator without any content. So we believe that there will be more niche content being created. And there's also a trend that people like to see domestic content rather than international content. Look at the media side. The international content is fairly stable, but there are a lot of domestic content, regional content. So we believe that we need to work with the local operators, local content providers to bring their content to a wider region. So in the case of Kindness, to promote the Thailand to the regional people in Asia Pacific. So we'd like to work with them and say, hey, I think this is a neat concept. You don't always have to fly to Switzerland to buy your luxuries items or to enjoy the steak over there. And go to different places. And for example, Thailand just got rated with the largest number of Michelin star restaurants.
I did not know that. Wow.
My kids follow this.
Did they see it on Thailand or was it on different?
No.
Okay.
So Thailand is a very interesting country. Very friendly, very good country, lots of varieties. So we believe that working with them, promoting Thailand and promoting their channel is actually beneficial not just to HSAT, but also to the Thai community and also to the people in the region. Okay, so we're looking at these niche channels. What can we do with them? How can we help them? How can we play our world citizen role aside from making a bit of money? Making money is important, but what do we do with those money? What does our action translate into?
Restocking those supermarket shelves. I think that's a great image. I'm going to have to come back to that at some point.
So I think promoting domestic communication, domestic channels, domestic content, helping to improve the regional understanding of different countries will promote trade, promote economic growth, and will be better for everybody. So, and by the way, we stock the shelf.
There we go. Yeah. So a couple more topics that I'd like to get into a little bit. So there was the interesting press release that I saw from the end of last year with Turbidite Limited for your data hosting agreement. And this is, so it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're going to be using AsiaSat's network and presumably the gateways to, to host data for Turbidite and to let them, I guess, well, I leave it to you.
That's why we separated our sales team into the media team and data team. They're very different business. And what we're trying to do is to create a sustainable ecosystem ourselves, rather than just being a simple player about resale capacity, for example. So when we look at the data business, what is data? Cloud. It's stored in the cloud. Where is the cloud? Nobody knows. It doesn't look anywhere. You can float away, right? So the important thing about data center is to have edge data center. You have presence in everywhere. You can move data from one data center to the other very quickly. Now, look at AsiaSat. We are not a global player. We're not like the Intelsat or the SES or the world. Right? We do not have a global presence in multiple countries. We cannot set up data centers all around the world. So what we say is, what is our advantage in Hong Kong? We have a piece of land back, which we're very careful not to waste it. We're slowly developing it. We added our 800 square meter data center in the back last year. We got certified for 27001. Okay, for services. And we said we want to make use of it, not to just rent out rack space. It's not sustainable. We get cheaper and cheaper. Okay. So we want to partner with a data center service provider that has the vision to build a network. Okay. Not just one here, over there, and then today I'll host the Pacific, tomorrow I'll host the bank. I'm happy with it, but no, we want to be part of a bigger network that serves the whole region. And that's why we talked about it. Okay? And we want to be a node in the entire network and support it. While we are contributing our core competency here, we're contributing our connectivity. Before a submarine cable comes or before your network is ready, you can use satellite capacity. Once those are in, then you can move the satellite capacity away. It's how do you manage your overall capability and resources to support an industry.
Interesting. So basically giving them access to your network in order to manage their own network of nodes around the world. And so if let's say they have a customer that wants to send some data from their data center here in Hong Kong, which I guess they have some space over here, to Sydney, and maybe they have some space over to teleport in Sydney, so they could just do that through your satellite network, and then it just becomes
data center business is very complicated. It's very big. Telecom data is very, very big, and I don't think we understand it enough, so we leave it to the capable hand of those people. Right? How do you cache data? How do you do emergency backup? What needs to be where? What's the least cost route to route them? And what is the best way to minimize latency? There's a whole big knowledge behind it, and we don't claim ourselves to be expert in those areas. So we rather work with people who know.
Makes sense. And okay, that makes sense. So one of the other areas that I looked at a little bit before our discussion was the patents that AsiaSat has been filing. And as far as I know, in the last 2 years, you've filed 4 patents, and 3 of those patents have had the word high-throughput satellite in them. And so could you tell us a little bit more about the patents, and then can we assume that there is some high-throughput satellite plan on the horizon, given the high-throughput satellite nature of the patents?
I think if you look across the board, not a lot of satellite operators go and write patents.
This is my understanding.
I don't see patent as a means to make money. I see patent as a means to allow us to do business in the way we want to do it. So what we looked at is we need to protect our future services. We need to be legitimate in rolling out our services, in providing services that we want, and in asking our manufacturer to design satellite to our liking. Okay. So when I looked at that, I said the first thing we need to do is spectrum utilization. It's not enough. At that time, we were already talking about C-band being used for 5G, so we need to have a smarter way of utilizing all the capacity. Why are all those guard band there? And if you look at one of the earlier patents of AsiaSat, it was about spectrum utilization. How do we
optimizing the guard band, I guess.
And that's why we really tried it at AsiaSat 9. It's a 37 megahertz, not 36 megahertz transformer.
It's actually 3%. It's something,
But that's using conventional technology, not good enough. So we looked at it. The first patent that we ever looked at was how to utilize spectrum more efficiently. Then we looked at it and say, everybody knows HTS is a simple frequency we use. But what do people use it for? What type of communication is required? What kind of problems they will face when you go into HTS? So our patent series has been, how do we use spectrum efficiently? Then we look at it and say, where will HTS be used? Okay. What type of problems will an application face to interfere and resolve them quickly? So that's what we have looked at in terms of our patent series. Not a lot. We are a small player. We only want to protect ourselves. can't remember how many patents we got. It gets costly.
Oh yeah, yeah. I guess I mean a lot of man hours, I guess, or woman hours.
So man hours is not the most costly part. Every time we got a patent approved, we give out gold coins to our employee.
Really, like 1 ounce, like just like saying kind of.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it gets costly.
Yes, yeah, good, yeah. Huh.
So
To all the employees or just the ones involved?
just the ones involved.
Okay, and if I remember, on most of those patents, there's like 5 or 6, and your name is on them. So it means
I stopped after I began to see it. I said, no, I can't.
you don't get the gold coin anymore. But the other 4 or 5 people on each patent, they gotta.
So I've given them the 30, 40 gold coins.
Wow, that adds up, doesn't it? Yeah.
But
That's a nice gesture. That's cool, though.
It's worth it. It's a lot of work, and our people do it at their leisure time.
Okay.
They also want to work with patent office, patent lawyers, which are overseas when they work from home, they work hours, and they are smart people. So that's how we develop our patent. And so we looked at efficiency, we look at usage, we look at it and say, what is the ultimate communication between HTS? It's not for terrestrial, it's for mobility. What's the ultimate mobility? Real. So the real HTS application in the future, in my view, is from LEO to GEO, and GEO to ground. Okay.
And I did notice that patent, and at least one patent on that
Right.
topic. Yeah.
And imagine, Maxar satellite, you fly over Russia and Ukraine, and they can see the troops deployment in those regions. Do you think Russia will allow you to put a Maxar Earth station in Russia? No.
Not like.
How do you communicate, transmit those images?
Through Leo, yes.
Through the GEO.
Through Geo, I'm sorry, yeah.
I mean, LEO, you need thousands of them.
Yeah.
You need to be cheap. They can only last for a short period of time. You're not going to put a high-end computer crack in LEO satellites. So
Right.
the way is to communicate the data back to the GEO and into
And
the ground.
yeah. Yeah.
So that was one of our. Now, of course, our technology will change. People thinking will change, application will change, and who knows where it goes. But a few years ago, we were thinking about HTS application. Is that the ultimate HTS application is to serve mobile terminals. Serve mobile terminals, what is the fastest one that's moving?
And a lot of LEO satellites in the field of view. Yeah.
And it's not. I'm not talking about the LEO com. I'm talking about the remote sensing.
Yeah, no, the remote, and as that data gets bigger and bigger, and as the resolution, I mean, it's incredible. I think I was interviewing somebody from Planet last year, and they were talking about terabytes of data being downloaded every single day, and that number is only going up. Yeah,
I think they have 3,000 earth stations. So that's how we feel it. Would we ever reach that point in terms of AsiaSat? I think it's challenging. But will the industry eventually get there? I think we would.
And so just to get back to the second part of my previous question, and understanding that it's probably a sensitive topic, but upcoming satellite plans, can we assume there's an HTS somewhere in the
Well, we've always been planning an HTS. I think we started in 2016 with the AsiaSat 10 RFP. We almost concluded the deal, but the last moment I said, no, the cost is too high. And at that time, we were talking about roughly $3.5 million per gigabit if you want to build an HTS satellite. And today, I think it's less than $1 million.
Can be, yeah, I think that would, yeah.
So if we have built one before you launch it, it will be obsolete. It will be not cost competitive. So when we look at it, it's the technology is still immature, the price point is too high, and to reconfigure an HTS will take too long in those technologies, in those days, and so we stopped. And I have a hard time explaining to our partners why we stopped it, why we spend millions of dollars on a proposal and then we decide to stop the program. It wasn't an easy discussion.
I can imagine that. Sounds like it would have been tricky.
But I honestly don't believe that the price point was there for a sustainable 15 million service. Now, we've never stopped looking at it in terms of what do we need and how the industry is developing. Okay. And we have set that in place. So we've been studying it, and we want to roll out our own HTS or hybrid HTS, and we need to.
Mm.
So we've been working on the HSF 5 replacement
Okay.
for close to 2 years now. Is the technology mature yet? Where do we need to serve them? Do I maintain some C-band or do I not maintain C-band? Where do I see C-band in 10 years from now?
That's a big question. Yeah.
So those are the things that we all consider. The HTS is the easy part. Now, today.
Mm.
Right? Today, the technology is mature, the onboard processor is getting better and better. So to deploy an HTS is simple. To deploy a satellite that can provide our legacy services that can last for another 10, 15 years, on top of that, with the HTS payload, how do you trade off the capacity demand and the resource demand between those two payloads in order is the tricky part.
That is a much trickier proposition than just saying, well, can we launch an HTS or not?
Yeah,
that's
the
a big.
HTS is easy.
Yeah.
It's Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah, the money, right? So we have to spend money wisely for our shareholders. We have to spend money wisely so our company is sustainable, our employee will have a happy life. So those are big decisions, but we've been working on that for close to 6 years now. If I get it my way, we will roll out one next year.
Well, that gives us something to look forward to. It'll be interesting to see. And with that, I don't have any other questions. Anything else that you would like to let our viewers know? Any other anything else going on at AsiaSat? Any other fun updates?
Oh, we are private, but we're still here.
They are private, but they're still headed. It's a beautiful place out here in Taipo. It's really the work-life balance. It seems pretty good. It's
just that I being an engineer, I'm more low profile. I'd rather get things done rather than market it first.
And go ahead.
So I don't like to go on panels because being an engineer, you always want to be precise, you want to be right. And if I don't have my cheat sheet, I cannot be right.
Well, there was no cheat sheet today, so let's hope that we kept the topics light and that it was And should we expect to see you guys at Asia Tech X Singapore, former Communicasia? Should we expect to see you there in a couple months?
It depends on the Hong Kong situation.
Okay.
The quarantine is no problem for us to leave Hong Kong. The problem is coming back to Hong Kong.
Yes, it is.
Right. So we've been deciding when is the right time for us to send our executives out. Now that Hong Kong has relaxed it to 7 days, it's more likely that we will send people out. But we will have people in Singapore on behalf of AsiaSat. We have our salespeople out there right now.
Okay.
So our Malaysia guy, our Indonesian, our Singapore people will be there. I can't promise that the AsiaSat management team will be there. Because I don't think I can tolerate them being quarantined for 14 days.
Oh yeah, and even 7 days is not fun. So, but either way, looking forward to seeing your team there, whether it's your Singapore team or whether it's people from Hong Kong. Or virtual. Yeah, it's always an option. So, well, Roger, thanks a lot for your time. It was really good catching up. And thank you all for watching. This has been another episode of the APSCC webinar series and a conversation with Roger Tong, CEO of AsiaSat. So, thank you very much, Roger.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Okay.
Thank you.